Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Oaks Countdown. Nicole Russo in Kentucky, joined by Dan Illman in New York, and it's time to embrace the chaos. In response to this coronavirus pandemic that they're working desperately to slow and halt the spread of, Churchill Downs made the unprecedented announcement yesterday that they will postpone the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks to the latest they've ever been run in their history. The Oaks now scheduled for Friday, September 4th, pending approval from the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, which Churchill Downs expects to receive tomorrow. Dan, a decision that underlines the severity of the situation we're facing and certainly will have a ripple effect through the rest of this spring and summer racing season as it unfolds.
Well, there's no doubt about that. This is the chaotic world we're in, unfortunately, and racing is not immune to the effects of the coronavirus. It is unprecedented, as you said, Nicole, that the Kentucky Oaks will now be run in September. And the major question is, how will this affect the horses that have been preparing to run the first Friday in May? I guess conventional wisdom would say there are going to be some new shooters coming in, some late blooming horses that all of a sudden they're now considered Kentucky Oaks contenders. It'll be very interesting to see if we get some more points races, where those points races take place, and how the horses that already have accrued a major amount of points adjust to this change in schedule.
Yeah, and the schedule changes are still an evolving part of the situation. Even before yesterday's official announcement of the Oaks postponement, the pandemic had caused the cancellation of some of our current preps. The Sunland Oaks not happening this weekend, the Grade 1 Ashland scrapped as Keeneland has canceled its entire spring meet in April. Now, divisional leader Finite, we still expect to see her this weekend in the Fairground Oaks, which will go on without spectators. Points earned toward the Oaks as of this point will still count. But Churchill, as you said, will add new races through the spring and summer for qualifying. Here are how your point standings currently look. Now, we'll have to wait for those new point races to be revealed, but as you've said, Dan, if you're a trainer, how do you approach this? You've been planning backward from the first Friday in May for months. You now have to create kind of a new form cycle for your horse. One who immediately jumps to mind as one who is on this very clear and careful path toward peaking in May is champion British Idiom. You know, her layoff after the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, her good comeback second. She was expected to take a step forward in the Ashland next month. You know, now not only is the Oaks not on the table, she'll have to come up with a new form cycle, but her next race up in the air altogether.
Now, that's a very good point, Nicole, although I'm not too worried about a horse like British Idiom. Yes, she was scheduled to compete in the Ashland, and then she would have run in the Kentucky Oaks with two prep races leading up to the big day. Now that the Ashland is gone and now that the Kentucky Oaks is deeper on the horizon on Saturday, it gives Brad Cox a lot of options. I would think races in New York are going to be in play. Races like the Acorn, races like the Mother Goose, perhaps a race like the Coaching Club American Oaks. Of course, however, we have to understand, how does this race now affect the Alabama? How does it affect the Cotillion? Do some trainers say, listen, the Kentucky Oaks is a cultural icon in horse racing. We would love to run our horses in the Kentucky Oaks, but now there are other options in the fall. Of course, with the Breeders' Cup also looming on the horizon and facing older horses, does this race adversely affect field size for the Kentucky Oaks? We're completely breaking new ground here. At least in the case of British Idiom, I believe Brad Cox will have a lot of options. I'm more concerned with horses like Finite and Donna Veloci. Finite, well, she's going to run in the Fairgrounds Oaks on Saturday. She's going to be a prohibitive favorite in that race. But after that race, what next? That seemed like she was coming up to the Kentucky Oaks in perfect form of several prep races. Do you back off on her? I wouldn't want to do that. Do you continue running her and perhaps have a tired horse in the fall? That's worrisome. In the case of Donna Veloci, really the only prep after the Santa Anita Oaks in the summertime is the Summertime Oaks, unless you want to ship her before the Kentucky Oaks. So there are a lot of decisions that have to be made. We could have some new shooters, but also Horses like Lake Avenue interest me all of a sudden. We talked about her last week. You usually can't have a horse coming off a disappointing race on the road to the Kentucky Oaks. You can't have a hiccup, Nicole. She had a hiccup, but now she has plenty of time to get back into form.
Well, that's a very interesting point about the horses with the hiccup, sort of having an extended time frame now, rather than this, compressed time frame where we're looking at May. I think that's a very interesting point about California horses now having to ship prior to the Oaks, whereas, in traditional years, there's nothing normal about this year now. Perhaps the East Coast and West Coast fillies would not meet until the Kentucky Oaks. Now I think they would be on a collision course earlier to that. We mentioned earlier that this might create room for some new shooters and later developing horses to emerge. One who immediately jumps to mind is the pricey filly Gamine, so impressive winning her maiden. Now she would have had to jump straight into a major prep race and win or place second to make the Kentucky Oaks her third career start. Now they'll have time to continue to develop a filly who was obviously a bit slow coming to hand. And, you wonder if there are more fillies like her out there who maybe haven't even debuted yet. It's really uncharted waters that we're in. And, I do think that it sets up a very interesting summer in this 3-year-old filly division in what will become your final prep races.
And what it does is it gives trainers like Bob Baffert with lightly raced horses like Gamine the opportunity to incrementally stretch them out in distance. Instead of rushing a bit and stretching out a quarter of a mile or even more for the next start in a race like a mile and a 16th, now Baffert can take his time with Gamine, maybe go the Charlatan route, go a 2-turn mile, eventually stretch her out. A race like the Acorn, I think, would be perfect for her if we wanted to go that route in New York. And Baffert, of course, has no qualms shipping to New York on major stakes days. But you're right. Maybe we haven't seen a horse debut just yet. And what will the points races look like? Will the test be a race that offers points? It is traditionally the most quality race for 3-year-old filly sprinters in the country, and those horses could conceivably stretch out for the Kentucky Oaks. Listen, this is a roller coaster for everyone all over the world, not just the horse racing world. We're just going to have to roll with the punches, and it's going to be a really interesting road, not only this year's Kentucky Oaks, but this year's Kentucky Derby. Another layer of uncertainty that us handicappers, analysts, horse players, and racing fans are just going to have to uncover.
Right. And, we're about 24 hours now, a little over, since the time that Churchill Downs made its announcement. Other tracks are only beginning to sort of adjust their own schedules in response. Certainly we'll be looking to NYRA, which has not released the summer stakes schedule at Saratoga as of yet. You would obviously think there would be some changes to the 3-year-old races at that meeting in response to that. Obviously, this is a situation that is continuing to evolve. So we'll be bringing you the latest on the road to the Kentucky Oaks and, of course, the road to the Kentucky Derby here on DRF.com and DRFTV.